Welcome to the Food Junkies podcast. Here, we aim to bring you the experience, strength, and hope of professionals working on the front lines in the field of food addiction. Our mission is to educate you, the listener, and increase overall awareness about food addiction as a recognized disorder. Here, we discuss all things recovery, exploring the many pathways people take towards abstinence in order to achieve a health-forward lifestyle. We hope to inspire you to thrive rather than just survive. So stay positive, make a change for yourself, and share your journey with others. And hopefully the message will spread. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Food Junkies. Today, we are joined by Amber Romaniuk, and she is an emotional eating, digestive health expert, speaker, and host of the No Sugar Coating podcast. Amber brings a refreshing, no-nonsense, yet deeply compassionate approach to healing our relationship with food, body, and self. Her work weaves through nutrition, mindset, emotional awareness, and lived experience, helping people move beyond willpower into real sustainable change. We're so glad to have you here for this conversation today, Amber.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm absolutely excited to be with you and dive so deep into this.
Awesome. So we actually really enjoy for our listeners to get to know, the expert and a little bit more about them. So can you share with us how your personal healing journey kind of involved or evolved to this professional path and how your lived experience really shapes the way you work with clients different from, maybe some of those more traditional emotional eating or weight loss approaches?
Yeah, definitely. So it's my own personal experience literally shaped all of this. I wouldn't be doing this if I wouldn't have gone through what I did. And so I think a few key things that really fueled me into binge eating, bulimia, food addiction, emotional eating, compulsive eating, like spitting and chewing food or chewing and spitting, like all of those things really came from a young age. So I was bullied on the bus when I was 5. I got on the bus and the older boys called me fat and ugly, and then the whole bus made fun of me. And I think that really made me take on the identity of fat and ugly for the next 20 years of my life. And that was a wound that my nervous system really hung on to that I had no idea, right? Because I had no idea about any of this at the time. I grew up my mom was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis before I was born. And I think being the only child and just them having so much on their plate to deal with that, I really didn't want to feel like a burden. And so I just kind of kept everything inside and held everything in. And I think just watching my mom decline through my childhood and like my whole life up until a few years ago just was absolutely so hard to process and grieve. And you feel out of control because it's like the woman who births you and like you look up to the most is like literally losing control of her body and everything. And there's like, you feel like there's nothing you can do. And so I think as well, unconsciously growing up, food started to become a soother for that lack of control I felt in that circumstance. And then you start, reading magazines and, I was in the era growing up in my teens of like Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera, the ultra thin, flat stomachs, like tiny, tiny, tiny bodies. And I think all the photoshopping and editing and just all this like unrealistic body image that we're sold, like really like programs your mind to think, oh, what's wrong with me because I don't look like that. And the comparison and all that negative self-talk and then the diets and all of that really evolved. And then in my early 20s, it was my first real breakup that triggered me into feeling so upset I could barely eat. And then I lost weight really quickly, started exercising 2 hours a day as well, and got to my quote unquote goal weight really quickly because again, I was programmed by the weight loss industry that once you lose weight, you'll finally be happy. And if you're told anything long enough, even if it's a lie, you believe it. So and then when nothing changed and nothing got better, I was like, well, this didn't fix anything. My period had disappeared because now I was probably a little underweight and just, yeah, nothing was getting better. And so it was kind of this all or nothing switch flipped. And I went to this party and I had a piece of ice cream cake and then I had another piece and then I had a burger and then I took the whole chocolate bar off the counter that was for everyone and went into the bathroom and ate it. And that was my first real memorable binge. And then on the way home, I got fast food and ate until I was so full I felt sick. And that triggered the all or nothing the next day of like, now I'm going to skip breakfast and lunch. I'm going to go to the gym for 3 hours and try and make up for it. And that all or nothing of binging and trying to restrict really fueled the opposite effect of what I wanted. I gained 80 pounds in 4 months. Now I'm the heaviest I'd ever been. Then I went through 6 months of binging and purging. Think if I purge, I won't gain weight, even though that's like more destructive on my body, and then I stopped that. But the binge eating was really out of control for a couple of years to the point where I'm just eating tables full of food. And when I look back, I'm like, how did I even eat that much? Like it was so much. And that just went on for a couple of years before I really could pinpoint what I was doing. I was just like, how did this all even happen? I don't understand. Well, all of a sudden I can't just, eat some of this and some of that. It's like I'm eating all of it in the house. I don't get it. And so I started to learn a little bit about binge eating and emotional eating. I'm like, I think this is what I'm doing actually. But even though I started to learn that I was doing this, it's weird when you're in addiction and you're in self-sabotage because there's this part of you that doesn't want to hurt yourself. You don't want to hurt your body. You don't want to do these things to like compromise your health. But the desire for your high and your dopamine reward and like the numbing and the checking out stays so much bigger. And in the moment, like that's what matters more than the way it's going to negatively impact my health and well-being. So I get it for people that are like, I don't want to do this, but I also don't know how to stop because that's what it felt like for me. And then I had a low point moment when I was laying on the couch in pain after a binge. I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so uncomfortable. I'm in so much emotional and physical pain. And I was 23 at the time. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to make 30 if I keep up this destructive level of behavior, this destructive level of negative self-talk, like pushing my body too hard in the gym and then restricting and overeating and binging is just like so hard on every aspect of your being. And I'd always throw the food in the garbage can because I'm like, if I throw it in the garbage, I'm not going to go and eat it. And that particular night, of course, I call it the ego mind, the inner critic, you could call it. I was like, well, this is the last time you're going to do this. You might as well just, finish off what you have. And so I went into the kitchen, pulled out my garbage, dug through, grabbed the cookies. Specifically, they were Oreos. And I ate them. And then I sat on the floor in just absolute shame and embarrassment that I just ate it in my garbage can. Then I threw the food out in the dumpster in the back alley and went later and pulled it out of the back alley dumpster. And I'm like, I just dumpster dove and ate food out of my dumpster. And that moment was incredibly important for me though, because what was happening for me was I was in this denial state that what I was doing wasn't a big deal. It was a big deal. And that moment crushed the denial that it wasn't. Also, like I said earlier, it's like we don't want to hurt our bodies, but the desire to chase the high and stay in this behavior that feels safe feels more important and relevant than the suffering that it's causing. But there is some point for people, and this was for me, where the suffering became much bigger than continuing to tolerate the behaviors that I was in. And the fear of change and the fear of the unknown, if I tried to deal with this, all the fear got crushed in that moment. And I'm like, I have no idea how I'm going to figure this out or what I'm going to do. And I'm overwhelmed by the level of weight I need to lose and to even understand the rest of this that I have no idea because I had no education on it. But I'm like, I got to figure this out because I'm not willing for this to be it for me and to end my life and get in the way of me having a great life that I know I deserve to have. And so that catapulted me onto the healing journey, which I coined very multidimensional because it was physical, mental, emotional, energetic, behavioral, chemical, self-love, like spiritual healing. Like it was all of the above. And going on that journey really helped me dive into all those different pieces. And as I healed, and I'm happy to touch on any of those pieces in depth, not only first did I gain my peace and what I call food and body freedom, where it went from like 95% of my mental capacity was asphyxiated with food, the number on the scale, diets restriction or planning my next binge. Like having that mental space available was like freeing. It felt incredible to not have that there. But I also realized what self-love and confidence felt like, and to feel in my power and feel empowered and to feel connected and in tune with my body just felt like the biggest gift for me to be able to give myself through my healing journey. And then having a lot of women asking questions about health and nutrition, and you look different and your energy is different. Like, what have you been doing? And yeah, asking questions, wanting advice. I'm like, I think I just went through all of this because I'm meant to help other women with this. And I have the brain of the addict and the recovered addict and all this stuff. And I know I get it. And so that's really what inspired me to start my business 12 and a half years ago, coaching women globally. And so many incredible gifts have come out of the experience, and I wouldn't change it for a moment. So that's what brought me into the work that I do today.
It's amazing. And I love, I always talk to, my clients about like, we're all drawn to our professions
Yeah.
for different reasons, right? Like we didn't get into the helping professions for no reason. And many of us have stories of our own, obviously, right? We've walked through the fires of hell and we want to do our
Yeah.
best to either guide others through it or try to prevent them from going through it or try to minimize whatever damage they might be taking on while they're in it, for whatever reason. And it sounds like you're one of those folks. And thank you for
Yeah.
sharing your story. That's very kind of you
Yeah,
to
of
be so
course.
vulnerable with us with that story, with your story. And and so you went on, you created the body freedom approach. And when I think of like this term body freedom, obviously I have my own definition of what I think body freedom is. And I'm curious to know when you think of body freedom or like your program body freedom, like what does that mean to you as a practitioner of said body freedom program?
Yeah. Yeah. So to me, it's really about ending the fight and the negative narrative with my body, with my inner critic, with food that is keeping me stuck in a cycle that is not serving my highest and greatest good of any level of my health and well being. And body freedom also allows me to fully step into the woman I've always dreamed of being because now I have my self love, my worth. I honor my boundaries. I don't people please anymore. I don't strive for perfection. I have nothing to prove because I love myself and I know I'm good enough and I validate myself. I reassure myself. And as we shift that mindset and we reconnect our worth and remember who we really are and the power of who we really are, that allows us to change the way we behave and make different choices for our health and well-being that are going to align to help us balance our hormones, balance digestion and blood sugar, reduce inflammation, have, less sensitivities and adversities to food, to feel connected and in tune with our bodies, to have our bodies actually feel safe enough to release weight without focusing on it, right? And so it really encompasses this full healing journey to what it is like, okay, I have body freedom. I have confidence and trust in myself. I love myself. And that allows me to really be present and enjoy, the going about my day, my life, not letting any of my old insecurities hold me back because they're gone. And if any new insecurities crop up, well, I have the ability to believe I can work through them and let them go and create more freedom. So that really is to me what body freedom is all about.
You mentioned the hormones there, and I think, our audience is very interested. It's still kind of, even just in general, women's health and hormones has started to become, the next it topic. I'm
Yeah.
wondering if you could speak a little bit about how hormones, and hormone imbalances adversely impact our relationship with food and can lead us to that maladaptive use.
Yeah, 100%. And there's a huge connection. And I'm glad we're having this conversation because it is not connected and talked about enough. And so you could have hormone imbalances that could be a majority reason why you're in self-sabotage with food or why you feel like you can always keep eating and you never feel full and satiated. And it's not that you don't have willpower or control or lack of control. It's that these hormones literally dictate everything. The way you feel, your mood, your energy levels or lack thereof, the way that you sleep and your sleep quality, right? Your appetite levels and fullness signals, everything is dictated by your hormones. So I'm going to give you some examples of how these can become emotional eating triggers or binge eating triggers. So let's start with cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And this is the most common hormone imbalance I see across the board for women. And a big reason for that is a lot of women are self-abandoning, putting themselves last, putting everyone else first, people pleasing, right? Old survival behaviors that just burn us out and keep the stress hormone elevated. So when the body senses stress, the brain goes, oh my goodness, we need to communicate with the adrenal glands, which produce cortisol. They sit on your kidneys. There's two of them. Adrenal glands flood cortisol and adrenaline through her body. She isn't safe. There's a threat. Your body can't recognize good stress from bad stress. It's just like there is stress. We're in fight or flight, produce all that cortisol. And once cortisol spikes, one of the first symptoms is fatigue or exhaustion. And as we have higher cortisol levels in the body and we feel tired, guess what? we have an increase of ghrelin, which is our hunger signal. So we have increased appetite, and high cortisol dulls leptin production, and leptin is your fullness signal. So even just with high cortisol, you have increased appetite and you actually have increased cravings for processed sugar, processed carbs, and salt. So that can already make it so easy to want to overeat. And when you're tired, also, you're in more of a I don't care, I'm tired mentality. And that just makes it easier to overconsume or make more mindless choices that can then trigger, oh, I messed up. I had that. Who cares? I'm going to just eat whatever I want through the rest of the day. And that can trigger that all or nothing behavior as well. Another big one with cortisol is weight. So one of the other first things that the body will do, especially women, when our cortisol levels are too high or too low, is we'll start putting on weight, especially in the abdomen. And that's because your body's so intelligent. She's like, there's a bear. If the bear is going to attack, we need as much protection in the abdomen to try and keep us alive so we don't die. So many, vulnerable organs exposed in the abdomen. So let's put the weight on. But then women get frustrated and freak out about that and go exercise more and restrict more. And that spikes the cortisol more and makes it easier to put on more weight and suppress metabolism more. And that fuels the vicious cycle of restriction and overconsumption, that all or nothing. So we just, even from one hormone, and I haven't even got into like the anxiety component of cortisol that can fuel the desire to numb out with food, right? And if you have a cortisol issue, you're usually not sleeping well, which fuels all the things I just already talked about. So cortisol is a big one. And then I see a lot of women dealing with a thyroid issue. About 65% of thyroid issues go undiagnosed, and women are 8 times more likely to have a thyroid issue than men. I personally believe a big part of this is the lack of self-prioritization, the body overwhelm, the high cortisol. And women, when you're out of your power, you may have a hard time speaking your truth, expressing yourself. You choke your words back and you hold back, and that really suppresses your thyroid, which obviously sits in the throat and the throat chakra. And the more we suppress, the more we can slow down or negatively impact the function of key organs in the body. And so I see women who start speaking their truth and expressing themselves start to improve their thyroid function, even if we haven't done anything else. But with the thyroid, what happens with emotional eating is when your thyroid is sluggish, which is most women are dealing with sluggish thyroid, metabolism and thyroid are very connected. So when your thyroid goes sluggish, metabolism slows down. You may not feel hungry, especially through the first half of the day. And so most women think, oh, I'm not hungry, I shouldn't eat. And so they skip breakfast, maybe even skip lunch. And then they're going into the second half of the day famished. And all of a sudden they want to overeat because all of a sudden this hunger surge hits them and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm just so hungry. And that can fuel binge and overeating later in the day. And then of course, when our thyroid and metabolism are sluggish, it's easier to put on weight, harder to release weight. And so that can feel very frustrating and trigger the desire to restrict and diet, which then, of course, when our emotional and binge eating triggers come in, we want to eat all the things. And so it just triggers that back and forth of diet and restriction. And now my body is depleted and they'll have this big hunger surge or I'm using food to cope, and it just keeps fueling this vicious cycle. The other big one is our sex hormones. So progesterone specifically. So progesterone is the calming hormone, ladies. And I've seen women from their early 20s into postmenopausal women, but early 20s, no progesterone, early 30s, no progesterone. And I put myself postmenopausal at 24, post binge eating and everything that I had put myself through. So these behaviors 100% can really throw your hormones out of whack, regardless of your age. And so when you have low progesterone, you lack more of your natural ability to be calm. So you feel more on edge on a regular basis. You feel more disconnected from your body. You're actually more critical of yourself and others when your progesterone is low. You do not sleep well when you have low progesterone. You're awake for 3 to 4 hours in the middle of the night. That is not fun. And that definitely is going to impact your mood and increase your desire probably to go and comfort eat. And one of the biggest reasons why low progesterone is such a significant impact on these behaviors is because we need enough progesterone to help our mood boosting neurotransmitters circulate. So we need enough progesterone to help with dopamine, which is our reward pleasure neurotransmitter. If that's low, it's so much easier to want to go and binge or mindlessly scroll or drink or online shop or whatever your dopamine inducing behavior of choice is, people pleasing. Also, when progesterone is low, we have a hard time producing enough serotonin, which is a mood stabilizer neurotransmitter, contentment, happiness, joy. That's what serotonin helps us feel a lot of, and it also helps us feel calm. We need enough progesterone to help circulate GABA, which helps us fall asleep, but also helps with like blood sugar, mood. And so when GABA is low because progesterone's low, you have more sugar cravings. You have more desire to use food for comfort. And lastly, but to me, this is one of the most important ones, is we need enough progesterone to circulate oxytocin, which is the connection neurotransmitter. So when you have low progesterone, you may have a lot of really good things going on in your life, but you may feel flatlined. You may feel absolutely nothing. And this is because we need enough oxytocin to actually feel and feel connected to ourselves. This helps us feel self-love. It also helps us feel connected to our spouse, our kids, our families, our loved ones, our career, our passions, whatever they are. And so if all of a sudden you're feeling nothing and you're feeling flatlined, you've got to go and get your progesterone and your hormones tested, because there is definitely something on that is just more than you having a day. And it's important we investigate these things before you make maybe some decisions that you wouldn't make if you had low progesterone, because some women are like all of a sudden just like they're like wanting to just like completely leave their families and relationships. And it's like, maybe if there's actually no significant issues, get your hormones tested first, because that feeling of disconnect is very real and it is hormonally connected. So when you have these hormone imbalances that also really impact your mood and the way that you feel or don't feel, or the lack of them gives you a lack of capacity to cope or feel safe. Your nervous system gets very dysregulated. And the more stressed your nervous system, well, the more likely we're going to want to be to hang on to that old safety blanket, which is food. And we want to eat for comfort and numb and shove down, or we want to eat to try and feel because we're not feeling because of the depletion. So there's obviously more, but those are some of the most significant things that I see with hormones. And you don't have to be in menopause or post-menopause, like I said, to have low progesterone, low estrogen, hypothyroid, high cortisol. I'm seeing these imbalances in 20s, 30s, and most women don't realize that perimenopause starts between 35 and 37. It's not like when you're 49 and you have a year of it, and then once your period stops in your 50s, that's it. No, it's a potential like 15-year cycle. And you may put yourself into perimenopause early in your late 20s or early 30s via these kinds of behaviors.
So I think we talk a lot on the podcast about cortisol, and definitely I think we've educated people enough around going to maybe get your hormone levels checked and checking out progesterone, but I guess we don't probably talk as much about the thyroid. And you
Mhm.
said this is clearly like a big issue for a lot of women. So I'm wondering how you might advise, people you're working with, what would be some first steps? Are there
Mhm.
specific tests you recommend?
Yeah.
What is like a healing protocol for thyroid look like?
100%. So the first step is we need to look at testing the thyroid properly, but then we also have to test for progesterone, estrogen, morning cortisol. We need to look at inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein as well. We want to look at vitamin D, B12, iron, ferritin, because all of these other levels play a role in your thyroid function and vice versa. And so one of the biggest issues I see, and I'm so glad you guys talk about cortisol so much, is I see so many women going for their yearly physical or to ask for blood work. And the doctor may order TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone, but it's actually like a 6 or 7 panel test. So how can you possibly, with just one read, figure out someone's thyroid function if whoever is not ordering all the tests? That's the first issue. And for some of them who are ordering the thyroid test, they're not testing cortisol, which is one of the key root fuelers of a thyroid issue, along with low progesterone, low ferritin, low iron, things like that, and high inflammation and poor gut health in the body. So the first block is there's not a thorough enough assessment and testing being done to get all the information. And I do all that with my clients. We do a full thyroid panel. It's about 40 or 50 tests that we end up doing right off the bat to see everything. Also cholesterol panel, because guess what? If your thyroid's sluggish, you are more likely to have high cholesterol. Because if your body is sluggish, your liver is sluggish, everything is sluggish, you cannot break down and eliminate excess of anything properly. Also, if you don't have enough estrogen, you have a higher likelihood of having higher cholesterol. So it's just like there's so many connections between all of this. And it's innocent. The education, I don't think a lot of the mainstream doctors have been properly educated about hormones, even the endocrinologists, that is their specialty. So if the mainstay of the practitioners aren't properly educated, how are you going to get the proper guidance information? It's not to blame anyone, but it's about reminding yourself you're the advocate and you need to find the people who will advocate with you and get you the information, do the testing, and give you a thorough explanation. So that's just the first thing I want to share is it's like, it's not as cut and dry like one test. It's like, we want to be thorough. And I'm glad you guys are for that. And so then from there, I suggest and always order TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone. Now, here's the other thing. The normal ranges for tests are way too big. Way too big. Okay. So here in Canada, the TSH range, and I'll explain a bit more about what that is, but it used to be 0.5 to 3.50. Now it's 0.5 to 6.50, which is insane because for women specifically, and all of my colleagues that are experts in hormones and thyroid agree, optimal TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone level for women is 0.7 to 1.75. And once you go above that, women are having and experiencing hypothyroid symptoms and it's not being properly addressed. And if my TSH goes above 1.75, even 1.85, my hair's falling out. I'm getting constipated. I can feel it. And then I go get the testing done again and it validates what I'm feeling. And it's like, okay, what else is going on that has altered this out of where my sweet spot is? So one of the issues is women are going and getting the labs done and their doctor's like, oh, you're normal. 3.5, you're normal. 2, you're normal. 6, you're normal. I had a client and it was 491 and the doctor's like, here's some Synthroid, no problem. I'm like, what? How are you even functioning? That's insane. We need to make sure you don't have Hashimoto's and we need to do antibody. And the doctor wouldn't even do that, right? So this is where like find the people who are not just gonna be like, oh, good, you're on Synthroid. That's it. That's all you need, right? No, that is not enough. So TSH is thyroid stimulating hormone. It's produced by the pituitary gland. And that's the first test we need to do. We also want to test your free T4 and your T3. So your thyroid produces T4, thyroxine, and then it's shuttled into different parts of the body and converted into T3. T3 is your active thyroid hormone, which means it's the one that goes out and is responsible for different functions in the body. So the opposing effects of hair loss, eyebrow thinning, cold hands and feet, not feeling hungry, weight gain, constipation, low ferritin and iron, high cholesterol, aches and pains, feeling puffy, retaining a lot of water in your face, really dry skin. These are all signs of a sluggish hypothyroid. Okay, this is what 98% of women are dealing with. Very rare, only about 2% are dealing with hyper, which is where everything's overactive. So I don't see it very often. And if it's going on, you've got to go get an ultrasound and ensure you don't have some kind of like a growth or like a lesion or a nodule or something that can be like overstimulating your thyroid. It's just being thorough is important. Then we also, one test just to rule out autoimmunity, we want to test your thyroid peroxidase antibodies, which if those are elevated, that can indicate Hashimoto's, which is autoimmune. We want to rule that out. And thyroglobulins, which is another test, which more so, it's also immune, but it's more so if you're dealing with that overactivity, it's called Graves' disease. And then we can look at reverse T3. There's sub tests we can look at as well to see how you're converting. But to me, it's like TSH, T3, T4, free T4, thyroid peroxidase antibodies, and thyroglobulin for starters. And the honest truth is your doctor may not order these and you may have to get comfortable paying out of pocket. And we need to normalize investing in our health financially. We normalize spending $1,500 on an iPhone and a $50 a week coffee habit. We can start normalizing our health and being willing to funnel more of that money to get the answers, because not having this information is more costly than spending a bit of money and having it. So that's the first thing, is testing and actually finding someone who will take a more functional read, since those normal ranges are too big. And you can do your homework and reach out to practitioners and ask them, like, how do you read tests? Do you take a functional read? What do you think the normal range is? Like, these are questions for you to start asking your practitioners before you hire them or go and see them. Then from here, like I said, we need to look at your cortisol, progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, like so many different things, because if your progesterone's low, it will make your thyroid underfunction. And if your thyroid isn't functioning properly, it will negatively impact your body's ability to produce progesterone. A lot of women don't realize that one of the biggest reasons for miscarriages is low T3 and too high of TSH. And so when women have their thyroid under wraps when they get pregnant, they're far more unlikely to miscarry and also have postpartum depression, because depression and anxiety are huge symptoms of underactive thyroid and low progesterone. So from there, what we really have to consider first off is we got to heal your relationship with food. Because if you are fighting with food in your body, you have increased inflammation, your digestion is stressed out, your blood sugar's off, and you're stressing all your hormones out. And that will make your thyroid more sluggish, will make it harder to produce T3 and convert, or T4 and convert it into T3. And like I said earlier, the more stressed your body, the more stressed the brain, the more I've overstimulated your pituitary, and you end up producing too much TSH. And we don't want too much because that fuels all these symptoms. So we need to like destimulate, get grounded, get regulated, bring the cortisol levels down, balance the other hormones. But healing your relationship with food is the first step because it's the biggest inhibitor to your body healing. And then we also want to look at, healing things like people pleasing, imperfection, and helping you prioritize yourself, sleep, eating regularly through the day, stop skipping meals. Please don't fast. When you have hormone issues like this, fasting, skipping meals, low carb, no, not going to do the trick. It's going to make it worse. There's a time and place for those things, but I find once women hit perimenopause, none of that's really a good idea unless you have a specific health issue that temporarily needs some of that. But they also trigger more binge and emotional eating because they're restrictive. So balanced eating, carbohydrates with fats and proteins, right? Fruits, vegetables, oats, like carbs are safe, but I'm not talking white bread. I'm talking like whole foods, right? So these are some of the first things. Then we usually have to look at the inflammatory load, testing and gut. And okay, how much are you consuming that's inflammatory? We want to make sure the liver is functioning properly. So as you're hearing, like there's quite a bit. It just depends on what's going on for the person, and be patient with balancing your thyroid. But the worst things you can do is diet, over caffeinate, wake up and go to the gym on an empty stomach fasted and not eat for a few hours, and restrict. Like those things are going to keep throwing your thyroid more out of whack. Yeah.
I'm so glad that you added like those kind of like asterisks, because the thing is like we as women need to eat some of these things. I know that we have these really loud influencing voices that are saying low carb, you don't need carbohydrate, all of these things. And I'm like, listen, these are the building blocks to these neurotransmitters and hormones that we literally need to run our bodies. And the longer this goes on with the fasting world, we are actually having loud female voices that were super freaking loud in the beginning coming out and going, you know what? I actually wrecked my hormones doing this. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Right. They're eating their words. And it's just so frustrating that we all along we've said like, gosh, there has to be less of this all or nothing. Like there has to be a middle way, and thank you so much for saying, like we have to be so careful with this. Like this isn't something that we can just like do for science for a long time and think that there's not going to be like negative outcomes. I mean, we're listening to your personal story and your personal experience, and it's not just N=1. We see this like in Olympic athletes, right? We see this, not just Olympic level athletes. We see this in athletes in general, male and female, right? Like we see this across the board in these extreme situations. And then you think about the people who are not like on some sort of, social scene or like where the spotlight's on them. So we know of these stories. We think about all the people behind closed doors who are doing these behaviors and having these outcomes, and they don't have a voice and they don't have people saying, do you need help? Or here, let me get you help. And they're trying to figure it out.
Yeah. 100%. And it's so frustrating when you're not getting all the information like about hormones, or like I had a client yesterday and her doctor refused to test insulin and C-reactive protein. And then we did them and they both came back sky high. And I'm like, this is why you're having trouble releasing weight. This is why you're feeling so much retention, because how are we possibly supposed to help with all the healing if we don't have all the information? And I'm not going to guess with your symptoms and just say, do this stuff. We need the testing and the symptoms and how you're feeling to all come and work together, because otherwise you can mess certain things up if you don't have the proper information. And are things too high or are they too low? And if you're dealing with several hormone issues, like it's going to take a different approach than if you just have one. And I think the other problem right now, and this is just my own personal opinion, but it's the Ozempic craze. I think it's one of the worst things to happen. And I think that it's also significantly negatively impacting thyroid function and hormone function. shutting off women's ability to feel because it's suppressing neurotransmitters, paralyzing women's digestion. Like, it's not the way to heal this. It is another band-aid. And how are you possibly going to figure out what's triggering you and that this is a self-worth issue if you just shove everything down and shut it off with another drug and then have potential serious side effects to deal with, right? Like, it's just, we have to use our discernment and go like, root cause healing is the way. Quick fixes are not ever going to get us where we want to go. And then it just comes down to the individual and how many times do you want to have to repeat the same pattern and get the same kind of like bricks thrown at your head before you decide you want to try something different.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to shift gears just a little bit because I think, the other component or another major component to this, and also in your wheelhouse of expertise, is the emotional eating side of things. And as a mental health professional, like everything you've talked about when we're talking about neurotransmitters and hormones, like obviously those things are the building blocks of our emotions and how this all kind of like, I often talk about it coming out sideways, right? These things are happening inside of us. We're exhausted, we're fatigued, like, right. When we are not functioning properly biologically, it's really hard to function properly emotionally, right?
Yeah.
It's so hard to regulate our emotions when our nervous systems are sensitive and right, overreacting to
100%.
everything. So can you talk a bit about like that framework of emotional eating as communication rather than a lack of willpower? Like, it's telling us something, right? It's information. And how do you help clients begin to see their behavior through that kind of reframe?
Yeah, first of all, I love that you even just said it's a communication, because it is. And whether it's emotional eating, binge eating, like a symptom, weight gain, whatever, it's like your body is trying to communicate with you, and your emotional eating triggers are teachers, and they're trying to show you and communicate with you where you're out of alignment or something needs attention. And so I think when you shift the perception, because it's not about you're broken or you don't have willpower, you don't have control, it's got nothing to do with any of that. It's that emotional eating and binge eating are very multifaceted, complex behaviors that we have not been properly taught and educated about. And they've also been normalized. Like, go and eat a whole pizza and be proud of it. Go and eat the whole pint of ice cream. Like, there's competitive eating channels where they're binge eating through food and they have millions of followers. So it's like being normalized and like praised. And so it's like there's so much confusion of like, it seems okay over here. And like, you know what I mean? So first we need to normalize that emotional eating isn't like a normal behavior. However, have compassion for yourself because you haven't been taught how to shift out of it. So I think the first thing is we need to understand what's triggering us, because if we don't understand what's triggering us, how are we possibly, number one, supposed to then understand what the trigger is about and give ourselves what we really need instead? And how are we supposed to catch triggers if we don't even know what's triggering us and those first signs of what feeling triggered is? Right. So that's why I always say to my clients, okay, let's start a list. What are you aware of that triggers you to emotionally? And usually right off the bat, they'll be like boredom, overwhelm. I got on the scale this morning and I didn't like the number that I saw. I ate too much sugar over the weekend, or I drank alcohol. And once I drink alcohol, then I just don't care and want to eat whatever. I did this diet, or I was put on this restrictive protocol, and then I wanted to rebel and eat all the things I was told I couldn't have, right? Like stress at work and negative interaction, poor sleep. Like but they're like, oh, this is a trigger. Oh, I didn't even realize that was a trigger. And so that awareness even just starts to build some like a bit of confidence of like, oh, I'm starting to see this. So that's a good thing. And then, I always say, let's start to understand like, what are those first signs that you're going to food? Because understanding the first polls, is it cravings? Is it you saw certain foods and now you can't stop thinking about them? Are you actually like, did you skip a meal by accident and you're really hungry and so it just makes it easier for the food noise to come in? Like, it helps you kind of look at your day and your habits and how you're taking care of yourself or how you're not, that then innocently can trigger emotional eating that could be prevented if you were drinking water regularly, not missing meals, and getting to bed at a decent hour. So some of it we can actually resolve by ensuring we're honoring our basic needs. It's like basic need stuff. And then from there, it's about being lovingly honest with ourselves around a few things. Because I had to do this myself too. I had to admit, I don't know what's triggering me. I need to figure that out. I don't love myself. I have this void, this lack of self-love that I'm trying to fill with food that I'm never going to fill with food. There's some level of unworthiness within me that I want to figure out what that is and why, and fill that void, right? In a mindful, loving way. And then also I had to be honest with myself. And this is going to look different for everyone, but like I was afraid to feel my feelings. I was really afraid to just feel. and be with it because it was so incredibly uncomfortable. And when you're used to numbing out, all of a sudden just stopping to feel is like the most terrifying thing in the moment. And that's because your brain senses discomfort as a threat to your survival. And so that's why a lot of this can feel really daunting to change in the beginning because your brain's literally like, no, your comfort zone is to go and eat. No, your comfort zone is to go and numb out. No, your comfort zone is to not feel or to avoid or stay overbooked and stay busy. And so when you start thinking about and attempting to change it, it's uncomfortable and your body and your brain try to revert you to what is familiar and comfortable because we like to be comfortable. And so I think even understanding that, okay, it feels incredibly uncomfortable to think about feeling through an emotion for even 30 seconds right now. However, I am safe. There's no bear in my room. There's no cougar, right? Like there's no physical threat to my survival right now. So I can differentiate. I am safe, but this is uncomfortable and I don't like the discomfort, but I can get through it. This too shall pass. And when you first put that timer on for just 30 seconds, 15 seconds, and show yourself you can do it. And then once you get to the other side of that time, you're like, wow, I did it. I felt nothing really bad happened. I can do, and it just builds the confidence and you start to believe more in yourself. And I think that's where like these first steps to addressing emotional and binge eating, they start to build confidence and self-belief. And I really believe those are two very vital things for us to carry with us through this journey to help us build momentum to fully overcome them. And then even if you do give into a trigger, it is about starting to be willing to see the value in spending time exploring what triggered you. Why did you make the choices that you did? What did you learn from it? Now that you have more awareness, what do you want to try doing differently next time it comes up? And what it also shows us is where are there boundaries to set? Where do you need to adjust your schedule to open up more time for yourself? Do you need to start going to bed earlier? Do you need to start a food prep routine so that you have food available so you're not missing meals and then going and making poor choices that trigger all or nothing, right? Are there some difficult conversations for you to have? And one of the biggest things, self-prioritization, opening up more time for a self-care practice, to get grounded, to, get out of your head and into your heart, to explore your emotions, to let emotions out, something that brings you joy and happiness. We don't spend enough time giving to ourselves because we're so in these survival mechanisms of overgiving to others. And a lot of women feel guilty prioritizing themselves and they think they're doing something wrong if they do that, which isn't true. And if we want to heal these behaviors, we have got to be willing to baby step into prioritizing ourselves and claiming our worth that I deserve to take time for myself just as much as the next person. And as you do that again, the comfort zone flips. And now what feels comfortable and familiar is taking the time. And when you don't take the time, that feels uncomfortable. And it's nice to flip that switch and to get to that place because you all deserve to take the time you need for yourself. How are you going to heal if you don't? Right? So self-care and time to explore your triggers and reflect and connect with yourself and your body and build awareness is incredibly important to shifting this. And I know everyone has a different schedule, but I've worked with women who have 5 kids and a career and businesses and stay-at-home moms and women in school and like all these different things. And they all, because they want the change, figure out a way. There is always a way. And if you scroll and can watch TV, you have time to do self-care. That's what I always say.
Oh, I love that so much. And I'm hearing so much of like, instead of us demonizing this behavior of emotional eating or binging, let's see it as a signal. And like,
Mhm.
what is the wisdom here in
Yep.
this experience that we can learn from? And I also love how you touched on giving yourself permission to practice. Right. And that, of course, we can't figure these things out if we never allow ourselves to practice. You can't play the piano if you don't practice first. And this is the same with like these recovery skills that we have to, take time to prioritize ourselves in order
Mhm.
to be able to name and notice what's actually going on for us. So I'm really curious to ask you this question because I've loved all your answers so far is one of the biggest things we've found in this field that we've both worked in the substance use disorder field for multiple years before we switched to the food addiction field, and the level of shame that exists among the population that struggles with food, body, self
Mhm.
is almost paralyzing at
Yeah.
times. So I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about how you work with shame, how you help your clients with shame.
100%. Yeah. It's one of the most common emotions that I see women feeling. And I think a big part of it is And I mean this in the most loving way possible, but the feedback I always get is like, I'm an intelligent woman. I know what I need to be doing and what I shouldn't be doing, but yet I'm not doing it anyway. And so the shame is kicked up because they almost feel like they should be smarter than it, or they have all this intelligence and knowledge, yet it's still not enough to help them shift the behavior. And I always say to them, you're not doing anything wrong. You are very intelligent. You are very powerful. You are an amazing woman, and celebrate all your knowledge. There is something here that you haven't yet learned as to why this is continuing to happen. And it's not the lack of willpower. It's not because you're lazy. It's not because you're stupid. It's none of that. It is because your body is so wise and you are so wise. Your body wants you to master your healing and master certain things that maybe you haven't fully given attention to. And that's why this is still happening. And that's why it's not healed and behind you yet. So are you willing to celebrate everything you have inside of you and actually open up to learn more, become more intelligent, more in tune, more aware, and let this lead you to that? Because it will, if you are open to it and you stop beating yourself up, or you stop resisting that I should just know it all and it just shouldn't be an issue. When we can get that resistance and the shame out of the way by shifting our perception and being humble to the fact that we all have knowledge, but there's always more to learn. There's always healing and opportunity to deepen our awareness. That is going to help us clear the shame. So that's often, and self-forgiveness. So that's the other thing that I find to be really incredibly powerful is even if you do give into emotional eating or binge eating, afterward, not only do we want to have awareness and go, what did this teach me? But then it's like, okay, I'm going to forgive myself. Why is it important for me to forgive myself and take my power back? Because otherwise that shame and continuing to drag that shame, which is such a dense, heavy, low frequency emotion, it keeps us in that dense, heavy state. And that's part of what keeps triggering the behaviors. So if we can forgive ourselves and take our power back, we actually clear some of that shame. And as we go along and we see these failures as learning opportunities rather than like, I suck, you don't suck. Failure is learning opportunity. Seriously. It's one of the best ways I've learned, right? So shifting perception will help clear the shame. And then you build confidence and then you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that was a trigger. Let me look at what that is. I'm ready to heal that. Like, and that's the attitude that starts to, because you're like, I can heal anything. I believe in myself. Look at everything else I've done. Like, of course I can do this too. And that's what happens when you shift the perception and let the shame go. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so shame is so interesting. And then when we're having this conversation, I just keep thinking about, when we lay it out biology first, and your words were like, when we give in to the binge or, whatever, something to that effect is what you said. I'm like, but like that wasn't like necessarily like a conscious choice. I think there was like a part where we think it's a conscious choice, but when we think about like everything, you're like, and then this, and then this, and then this, it's like when we think about like the biological processes that are occurring in our body that are
Mhm.
all kind of like driving these decisions, heavy quotations for anybody listening, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That it's really being driven by this part of our brain that one does not give 2 cents about our bodies being aesthetically pleasing, right? Like, two does not have higher ordered thinking abilities,
Yeah.
right? Like any of those
Exactly.
things. Like it, like, so, when we think about all of those things, I'm just like, does shame even need to come into play here? If we're going to be using our higher ordered thinking, like, can we then
Mhm.
use our ability to have that rational thinking? You
Yeah.
know, so there's that bit of it, that piece of it really comes to play for me there. And then I really think about too, as you were sharing, it made me think about, that it's about, that head knowledge and then that heart knowledge and like
Yeah.
getting those things to match, and that's the work. Is
Hmm.
it's just really like, how can we find that self-compassion to just be like, oh yeah, you're just figuring it out as you go. Like, you're just living your life
Yeah.
for the first time, the same as anybody else. So to your point of like, there, like, you're just like, how did you put it? You said, like, your failures, you're learning from your failure, right? Like, it's about experience. And in my house, we do everything for science around here, right? Like, so with my kids, even from ever since they were very little, it's like, they were always like, oh, can I do this thing? Or what happens? We're like, I don't know. It's for science, right? Like that, like those are the literal words we say to our children, always have. And honestly, it has been something that my husband gave me because I was a person who was stuck in shame from a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been like freedom from that
Yeah.
shame piece, right? Because when we stop seeking perfection and we start seeking experience, or we start seeking knowledge, but not necessarily does it have to be like head knowledge, but just like that
Yeah.
nervous system knowledge, right? Like a corrective experience or a new experience, there is no failure. It's just, again, it's just information
Yeah.
that then we can kind of make these shifts with. It's so amazing. And I just
Mm-hmm.
love that you like provide that as well as like part of this like whole packaged, like program that you work with clients on. So thank you so much for sharing your perspective
Yeah.
on shame. Yeah.
My
But
pleasure.
thinking of that and shame, because we talk again, like I was saying, we talk a lot about shame because we primarily work with food addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And the listeners of this podcast primarily probably identify as, like would use the words food addict most
Mm-hmm.
likely,
Yep.
rather than emotional eating, but they probably do identify. I mean, I think it's all bound up
Yeah.
in there, right? So how do you work with clients who maybe name it food addiction, and maybe you haven't had that experience, but if they did, or maybe they do, how do you integrate safety, compassion, and accountability like within that context?
Yeah, a lot of women I deal with are dealing with food addiction, and I went through it myself. So it often comes up, and it's like, oh, food addiction, and then it's like I'm binge eating and this loss of control and this full asphyxiation. And so I think the first step is I always share just authentically from my heart, like what I've been through, what I observe my clients going through. And I think just like the repetitive message of you're not alone. You're not the only one dealing with this. You actually don't have to keep dealing with it. It doesn't have to be your burden to bear. And can you have some compassion and empathy for yourself for what is? I think that that's just like the most important first thing, and like holding the safe space when women come for a consultation or come to a call, and just hearing them and letting them share for maybe even the first time what they're dealing with. And actually having that gratitude for them feeling safe enough to open up. I think that's one of the biggest gifts. And then I think from there, helping them start to identify, do you know why this is happening for you? What have you tried that has worked and hasn't worked? And have you taken a root cause healing approach? Because a lot of us have been conditioned to try another diet, try another elimination, try another protocol. Just get your hormones tested and take a supplement. That's like one part of it, right? So just getting curious, like, what have you tried that isn't working? And what have you tried that does? And most of them will say, well, I haven't tried anything that's worked. And I have been doing a lot of diets and chasing numbers and weight loss focus and all these things. And so opening up to what we were talking about earlier of, do you know what's triggering you? How do you feel about feeling your emotions? Where are you on your priority list? And how is your, relationship with yourself and your body? And then they start to go, oh, I think I can see why I have been staying in these behaviors, because I don't know everything that's triggering me. I don't understand, how to cope in healthy ways. I feel afraid to feel. I don't feel good enough. I'm overbooked. I'm people pleasing. And just it helps them better understand what is rooted in these behaviors, and why weight loss is not going to heal their relationship with food, and why an elimination diet protocol is not going to help heal their relationship with food. And I think helping them better understand why a different approach is going to be very powerful for them. And that, yes, in the beginning, it can feel uncomfortable, but they're safe. And like, we take it at a pace that feels good for you. And we check in and ensure that like you feel supported, but also we understand that if there's opportunity, we're going to lovingly call you out and point out the things that aren't serving you, and that it's your responsibility to go out with the tools and the recommendations into life and try to integrate them and be willing to prioritize. And that's going to take longer for some versus others. But at the end of the day, it's just truly about being willing to be committed to your journey, no matter how long it takes, and detach from the time frame, because most of you have probably been dealing with this for years and decades. I know that's my client's case. And so if it's been years or decades, you can't expect in a week, in a month, 3 months, it's fully all resolved. So patience, grace, compassion, and understanding a big part of what's going to help you heal this is learning how to master your ego inner critic. because that voice in your mind has been governing you your whole life, and it's not the true you. The true you lives in your heart. And so when we can learn how to master our ego and take our power back from it and live more in our heart, which is the presence, the power, the compassion, the self-love, we're going to go back and forth. But you want to learn how to spend more time in the heart place. That's going to help with all of this so much. So I teach my clients a lot of that ego mindset work, because your thoughts and emotions dictate the way you behave, and how you behave really dictates your current state of health. So we want to address all those pieces. And I think educating on that and normalizing conversations around that and root cause healing are just the things that I'm constantly sharing about that help my clients, whether they're binge purging, their food addiction, emotional eating, binge eating, whatever it is, to really help them fully resolve these behaviors for the rest of their lives.
I love that so much, because it's like, most of the time people come to us and they're like, well, I just like need a different food plan. And they're just
Yeah,
like
totally.
externalized fix for an internal problem.
Yeah.
And I also loved it's not about like, how fast can I fix this? It's like, how deeply do I want to heal this? Especially when, a lot of these behaviors maybe started in early childhood.
Yeah.
And oh, I've been doing them for like 45 years. So, but I should be able to wrap this up in a month, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
check
Reality
mark.
check. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be a lot different, but it's true. And because the diet and the weight loss industry are like, lose 30 pounds in 30 days, and there's such short promise time frames, it's for such fast results, and most people are trained to get a dopamine high from seeing the quick results that all
Yeah.
these quick fix plans promise. And so we get addicted almost to like staying in those kinds of protocols as well. And so we have to kind of heal that too.
Right. The diet trauma. And
Yeah.
it's so seductive.
Yes,
Right? Who
exactly.
wouldn't? Any human out there,
Yeah.
would want but if it was sustainable, there wouldn't be so many different programs
Yeah.
offering it all the time, right?
Yeah.
Exactly that. So we are so grateful for having you here today with us. Can you let our audience know, where can they find you? Where's the best place to reach you?
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me. So the best place is the website, which is amberapproved.ca. If you're wondering if you're struggling with binge and emotional eating, I have a free quiz, as well as you can learn more about body freedom. There's a free emotional eating workshop. And if you want to connect for a consultation to talk about support, including hormone testing, which I do offer with all of my clients, you're welcome to book that. It's complimentary. And then the podcast is the No Sugar Coating Podcast. It's available everywhere. And then I primarily hang out on YouTube and Instagram, and it's my name at Amber Romaniuk, Romaniuk.
Perfect. And we have a signature question. So it is, if you could tell a younger version of yourself, one thing about maybe food addiction or recovery from it, what would you say to her?
You are going to learn so much about yourself going through this experience. You have nothing to fear. Keep your courage and bravery up, and you're going to come out the other side so empowered and so much self connection. It's going to be the biggest gift you ever give yourself, and it's going to truly equip you to navigate the rest of your life with more grace, more confidence, and more trust, no matter what happens.
Oh, so beautiful. Amber, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, ladies, for having me. I've absolutely adored our time together.
Thanks for joining us this week on Food Junkies Recovery from Food Addiction. Make sure to join our Facebook group, Sugar Free for Life Support Group. I'm Sweet Enough. Molly and Clarissa are food addiction professionals who offer one-to-one counseling and group coaching through Sweet Sobriety. Please subscribe to our show so you never miss an episode. While you're at it, if you found value in today's episode, we'd appreciate you leaving us a review on your favorite platform. Your feedback helps grow our show and allows us to reach others who need to hear this message of recovery. Don't forget to pick up a copy of Dr. Tarman's book, Food Junkies. And as Vera always says, the power is ours.